Is there a beginning to your history with movies, or does it go all the way back to as long as you could remember?
I think one answer to that question would be to describe Sea Slugs, the movie. I'm doing air quotes here that I air quotes made in third grade.
Nice.
Basically, but I think it was sort of like third grader pyramid scheme. It's like but I totally innocently had this idea with a friend of mine that we were going to make this movie called Sea Slugs, and the whole grade got hyped about it. Right, we were like, oh, you're going to play this. People would like come up to me, can I be this? Like I had this idea, and it's all like, yes, that sounds great. Like we're totally and I think that I've wondered whether that moment like sort of defined my understanding of what social approval is like for me, like what it feels like to be like winning socially or something like that. It's sort of like it got in my bones. But that might be a place that idea started.
So you were getting excited about making it and people were reacting to it and that was motivating for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the story was about a bunch of sea slugs. That's the name. Who I think like landed on Earth for some reason and became like superheroes and had to defend. And there was like a bad guy that I was going to play who's like a Terminator with a tiger arm.
Nice.
And yeah, yeah, people were hyped about it. I think it was like nobody actually really minded that it never even got close to being made in any capacity. You know.
So how far did it get?
Nowhere. I think we drew some pictures and then moved on to the next, playing Pokemon or whatever it was. Yeah.
Cool, but they still enjoyed it because there was like this huge idea and it was a story that was interesting to them and they wanted a role.
Yeah, being involved in something.
Cool. So from the beginning, films were a big project. You understood that about them, that they involve a lot of people, and there's a lot. Then everybody sort of specializes, and they all have a piece of the puzzle to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like how do third graders think? I'm not totally sure I remember. Um, I think it's like there's just a bounty in being the center of attention and like having a way you can get everybody to be part of something. I just rewatched Fantastic Mr. Fox yesterday. Have you seen that movie?
No, but I've heard it's more interesting than it maybe looks on the surface.
It's based on a Roald Dahl book. But basically, not giving too much away. There's a part where the main character, addresses each of the different animals and describes their scientific name and what powers they have, and they're just like, you can tell that everyone kind of brightens up when they've got a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can do the scheme together and save the day. It's kind of like that.
Did it connect to the stuff that you liked to watch when you were a kid? Like, was that where the idea came from?
Well, I like the Terminator.
Uh huh.
I definitely had a thing for the. Yeah, I think probably Terminator 2 was an early. I remember watching it with that friend, and his mom fast forwarded the some of the bloodier parts. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think there's like a surgery scene in Terminator 2
Mm.
with like some a muscle showing or something like that. Um, but yeah, no, I was obsessed with it. Uh, who knows? Maybe early image of masculinity is like the Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Uh-huh. I think that's a common choice. I feel like that was big around me too when I was a kid. I don't even think I got to see it when I was a kid, but like that
yeah.
film was groundbreaking in some way, and it really got through even to young people.
Right, right. Yeah, that was probably an early R-rated movie.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, the other one I'm thinking of is The Leprechaun. I don't know
Uh-huh.
if you know of this.
I haven't
Um,
seen it, but I know what kind of thing it is.
yeah, the horrible B movie, slasher leprechaun, saying "me want me gold" because the stupid college kid stole his gold. They have like three or four of them. There's one that's like leprechauns in space. I think they learned what they were making, right?
Hmm.
But I watched this at my grandma's house without my parents knowing, and they were like, "What did you let him watch?" Because I was then having bad dreams about leprechauns.
That'll
So,
happen.
yeah.
So when did you actually get a camera in your hands for the first time?
Um, well, I one thing I might add, so I think I went to like at some camp. Well, no, actually, let me think about this. Sixth grade, I made for a physics class, made a video that again I got a lot of approval for. I used to skateboard,
Mhm.
so it's like I'm going to explain gravity and I'm going to try to jump my skateboard,
Cool.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I filmed that. I don't know where I even had a camera. I don't think I had my own. I wonder if we could have rented them from school or something like that. I'd have to think of, maybe I had some shitty hand cam or something.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I was able to go to some camp where I made a short thing of like a Matrix parody.
Hmm.
But I had it in, what's interesting, I had it in mind that I was going to make movies as a kid. I used to walk around and like draw concepts and think of ideas and whatever. And then at a certain point, I decided I wasn't going to do that. And then fast forward 10, 15 years. And then I was like, no, wait, I actually do have to do that.
Mhm.
So there was an intermission, if you will.
What did you get into in that interim period that might have contributed to coming back to film?
I remember the explicit thought process that I had, which was I was like probably 15 or 16 or 17, thinking about my future. And I thought to myself, I can either make beautiful worlds, beautiful fictional worlds, or I can make the world be beautiful.
Hmm.
Right. That was how I framed it to myself.
Mhm.
And it's no longer the frame that I see it in.
Mhm.
But I was like, I've got to try the second one. That was a whole. I mean, what I ended up doing is like I got really into the the ideas behind startups before I ever tried to make a startup, like in
Mhm.
college, reading Peter Thiel and reading all the, agile development, all the Paul Graham. Like I got really into like startup stuff with the
Mhm.
idea that I was gonna make a bunch of money and then do cool stuff. I didn't know exactly what cool stuff I was gonna do with the money. There's often a problem of the money maxing ideology.
Mhm.
Um, though I did have one idea that I still think was pretty awesome, which was that I was going to buy priceless treasures, acquire priceless treasures, and then hide them um, with traps and so on in order to basically have it be that the world had more dangerous treasure hunting in it, right?
Uh-huh.
Very straightforward.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I got into other stuff, but I had this idea that I was going to make a bunch of money with startups. What ended up happening was I tried various startup ideas, and I would lose motivation on them because essentially they had nothing to do with things I really cared about.
Mhm.
To sort of make money for its own sake. I know people where that hits, and they really love the process of that, and they couldn't care less exactly how. They just like building that machine. But basically, it's not me. I think I sort of have to, if I have any chance of doing my best work, make things I care about in a richer way.
Mhm.
Um, so I did a bunch of different things, but that's one way to cast the interim period.
So I'm really interested in how well, what I'm interested in is like it seems like maybe there's some kind of pipeline for movies in your life from some prior earlier form where perhaps it's just like maybe not consciously but like art for art's sake, movies as objects that deserve to exist in their own right and are worth are invaluable or something like that. And then you go through this process of thinking about business and processes and how things get made in a practical sense, come out the other side of that. Does it is it that shapes your sort of sense of why movies get made, and that you want to then implement this medium that you care about in a sort of, I mean, I don't want to like over determine it, but like a businessy way. Like is it a new kind of film now because of that interest in that learning?
Yeah, let me. I'll answer something nearby what you asked.
Yeah.
I believe that each person has a idiosyncratic gift to give the world.
Hmm.
That may be great or small. It may be local, personal, individual, or it may be grand, and etc. It's idiosyncratic, all different contexts, etc. Um, I think that the idiosyncratic gift has something to do with the idiosyncratic difficulty that the person has in the world. So it's a bit of a Jungian. There's the dark side and the light side are interconnected. they both bring each other into existence, kind of thing. You said you had some spirituality stuff on this,
Yeah,
so
you go for it,
leaning
man.
in, and I believe that I have had some kind of affliction with reality and fiction.
Hmm.
So there's this question, of a lot of things that I find natural are they're internal and they relate in a certain way to dream worlds. So narrative, fiction, social things, psychology, philosophy, these are all things that are more natural to me in a certain way. Then there's the external world, right? And there's all these things that are very worldly, like not internally focused. And to me, like starting a business is like less of an interest. I mean, I believe there's introspection that's important, but it's like ultimately or centrally, it's less of a internal thing, right? It's like the money's got to work, like all the steps have to happen. So I think that part of it is um, with this particular affliction, this difficulty or confusion, there's this question of like, what is the role of the dream of any type? Why do we watch stories? Right? Why do we what do we get value from in looking at something that didn't happen? I'm reading this book about how to read plays, which I'm reading it so I can learn how to write screenplays, backwards and forwards by David Ball. It's extremely good. And he at a certain point he clarifies. He's like, it may seem obvious to say, but Hamlet does not exist. He's not a real person. There are the bones of a person in the play, but not a full person. The actor brings in the humanity. I'm sort of wandering through this thought space a little bit, but to bring it back, there's a thing that I'm trying to do, which is like maybe there's a thing that my life is trying to answer, which is how can the dream improve the reality? How can we, how can we how can we live better by by consuming fiction or stories or media. So I have this video coming out. I think by the time this is out, it will have been released, where I talk about part of the purpose of and direction of what I'm trying to make with Hallsong is the name of the studio I'm launching. And there's this idea, which is media, which brings people back to the world rather than distracting them from it.
Nice.
I mainly want to make stuff that I write. This may be this is a bit in the megalomaniacal direction, but I'm a bit of a believer in like, the creative dictatorship, or maybe it's sort of like creative republicanism. I think you could have, like a collective where people take on, but then own things. But there's sort of individualistic element there. But I mean, basically what I'm planning to do is start making shorts and then see if I can make a feature length thing. And a lot of my ideas surround, and it's all very embryonic, but there's a lot of basically what do you call it? Keywords are philosophy, history, and mythology. So I'm thinking a lot about the books from those areas that have helped give me more direction and orientation in life, and that's kind of like where I sit with, because it's kind of the I did philosophy was my undergrad. I've like done a lot of that, so that's kind of where another place I'm coming from, and another stream I'm trying to blend into the whole.
What I find unusual in your approach, which is a compliment, obviously, is like the presence of like a thick entity, like a named being. Hallsong is what I'm referring to, like as something that's in the world now, as the filmmaking is still in progress. I mean, I know you've made a lot of shorts and I've like seen your work in film form, but like so many filmmakers that I know like sort of give themselves to whatever their current project is in a totalizing way. And it's just like all about that film and its title and, they stand behind it as an individual maybe, but like I'm interested in what the creation of of a being, of a label, of an entity,
Right.
whatever you would call it, is drawing out of you as far as working towards like that feature as a maybe the next big goal or something.
Right. Well, so I started sort of more explicitly having content creation be my thing early in the pandemic, and it's now 2023 for future historians. And the I sort of like flatter myself that someday, if there were a student of the works of Michael Kersey, that they would be able to draw through lines and connections between the things that I haven't been able to fully articulate about what I'm trying to say. I believe there's a central set of themes. I've got like 40 Substack essays and nearly 100 YouTube videos, and I believe it's all about kind of one thing, which is, in a way, it doesn't look like that because there's all these different topics. But to me, it's about the sort of like central idea. And so, as to what you asked about Hall Song, I'm sort of, to me, in part, it's a way to raise a banner and say something is happening here. Like there's a project that's happening, and there's a spirit behind it, and there's a direction I'm going in. I think with launching your own projects, there is definitely you sort of have to declare yourself into existence before it makes any sense for anybody to believe you. So it's a bit of that. I mean, I'm saying something's happening here. I'm going in a direction. There are a million untold stories from history, mythology, and philosophy that can be told, and I'm marching along, and I'm going to try to make them, and I've been trying to make them, but the best is yet to come. So it's sort of, I don't know. I mean, that's the format it came out in, and ultimately, it is the work. I think you have more fans of movies than you have fans of movie studios. I think ultimately, it's like the property that is the most intriguing to people. But it'll happen. It's sort of like a starting point.
So is it like, so you mentioned that future person looking back at this work, you're like trying to give them a way in? Is that, I mean, like I'm thinking about my relationship to specific filmmakers that I admire, like Kubrick, for example. Like it's like I can list his films, but there's no like organizing principle that I can start from. I feel like you have to like sort of do the analysis yourself to figure out your relationship to it. Is that you're trying to head that off, sort of? Are you trying to like give people a way to organize it for themselves before they begin?
So there's a way I used to describe the plan and types of projects I used to think about more, and I expect I'll come back to it, but it might be, I don't fully know what I'm trying to become. It might be that I'm like too pedagogical to be, a pure entertainer. I have to avoid being preachy. It's very important to avoid being preachy because it's annoying and no one cares or needs to hear it. And it's usually coped for not knowing how to say it in a different way. Not knowing how to let things stand for themselves, right? So that's the sort of. But I've thought about like having a movie which has a shitload of footnotes, right? Like this is like a thing I haven't heard of. But imagine that the understanding, and somehow you get this across, is that you're going to watch this movie and we talk about Plato's dialogues, or we talk about Aristotle, and we talk about, and there's a place that you can very easily find literal citations of parts of those texts if you want to read further. Like, this person had a speech in which they mentioned like Diomedes' ladder. This is what that is. Here's what you can learn about it. Like, this is how it connects to other things. I have this sort of like weird idea that the fiction and the nonfiction can like walk together and be part of the same conversation. This is part of why I'm inspired by like Plato in particular. It's like he wrote dialogues. He didn't write papers. And it's cool. I mean, there's just something very cool to me about this interconnected conversation. That's also part of the inspiration for the name Hall Song, is this idea that there is this song that has like, multiple parts, that is ancient and a little bit inspired here by Tolkien's idea of in Tolkien lore of the music of the Ainur. And in my sort of limited understanding, is that there's this like music based metaphysics which is playing out over time and over history, and the elves and the dwarves and the men are the different parts of the music, and there's the rising themes and the fall and all this kind of thing. And so basically it's these like kind of intellectual foundations that I want to speak to and speak from.